My wife of 15 years publicly demanded a break to see her ex at our anniversary party. I agreed and vanished. When she came back, she didn't just find an empty house. She found divorce papers. My name is Alex, and for 15 years, I believed my marriage was like the house I'd built for my wife, Ava. I believed it was constructed from the best materials, resting on a solid foundation of love and trust, designed to withstand any storm. I'm a master carpenter. I understand the nature of things, the strength of oak, the resilience of cedar, the importance of a true plumb line. I thought I understood the nature of us. Now I know I was a fool, a man who spent all his time admiring the beautiful facade while the foundation was being eaten away from within. Our house sits on a 2-acre plot just outside the city, nestled in a grove of old maples. I poured the concrete for the foundation myself, my hands raw and aching for weeks. I framed every wall, my sweat staining the pale pine of the 2x4s. The wide plank floors are reclaimed oak from a century-old barn, and I finished them on my hands and knees until they shone with a deep, honeyed luster. I built the fieldstone fireplace with stones I gathered from the creek bed at the back of our property. It was a labor of love, every nail driven, every board cut, a testament to the life I was building for her, for us. Ava loved the house, or so I thought. She had a flair for the aesthetic, picking the paint colors, cool, serene blues and grays, and the furniture that filled the spaces I had created. She loved hosting parties in the garden, where I had cultivated a rose garden exactly like the one her mother had when she was a child. The scent of those roses on a summer evening, mixed with the smell of cedar from the porch swing I'd built, was the scent of my life's contentment. But a house is not a home without the people in it, and our home was often filled with her family. Her parents were pleasant enough, but it was her younger brother, Leo, who was a permanent fixture. Leo was 42, perpetually between jobs, possessing a lazy charm that everyone but me seemed to find endearing. He lived in a small apartment downtown that we subsidized, but most of his time was spent at our place, eating our food, drinking my best whiskey, and holding court on the patio. He'd clap me on the shoulder and call me the salt of the earth, a compliment that always felt like it had a hidden edge, as if to say, "You're the worker bee, I'm the queen." I was the reliable one, the fixer. When her parents' water heater broke on a Sunday, it was me, Alex, who spent the day in their damp basement fixing it. Leo was there, of course, providing moral support, which meant he was in the living room telling a story that made their mother laugh. I could hear them through the floorboards as I wrestled with a rusted pipe. That was the dynamic. I was the foundation, unseen and functional. They were the life of the party. I told myself it didn't matter. I loved Ava, and her family was part of the package. I was a quiet man by nature. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I was happy to be the one who made sure the lights stayed on. The change was gradual, a slow cooling I chose to ignore. It started about a year ago. The easy silences we used to share became just silent. She started spending more time on her phone, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips as she scrolled through messages. When I'd ask what was so amusing, she'd just wave a dismissive hand. Oh, just silly things from friends. The way she said friends felt vague, impersonal. Then the names started to surface. Julian. He was her college ex-boyfriend, the one she always described with a mix of pain and electric nostalgia. He was an artist, a passionate, unpredictable man who had ultimately cheated on her and broken her heart. It was the reason, she'd once told me, she knew she needed someone stable and dependable like me. I was the safe harbor after her storm. I saw Julian is back in town, she mentioned one night, her eyes fixed on her phone. He's had a gallery show in New York, apparently. Good for him, I said, meaning it. I felt no threat from a ghost. But the ghost began to take on flesh. A week later, Leo brought him up over dinner. I ran into Julian the other day, he said, shooting Ava a knowing look. He asked about you. God, you two were something else back in the day. A real bonfire. He then looked at me and smiled that placid, condescending smile. Alex is great, of course. A rock. But you and Julian, that was an adventure. Ava didn't defend me. She just gave a little wistful sigh. We were young and foolish. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, but I said nothing. What could I say? I was the rock. Rocks are silent. Rocks are dependable. Rocks are not adventures. The final slide began with the planning for our 15th wedding anniversary party. It was my idea, a big celebration to mark the milestone. I wanted to fill the house and garden with everyone we loved to show them the strength of what we'd built. I threw myself into the preparations, pressure washing the deck, hanging string lights through the maple trees, planning a menu of all her favorite foods. Ava's involvement was strangely superficial. She was obsessed with finding the perfect dress, a shimmering, silver thing that cost more than my first truck. She spent hours curating the guest list, adding more and more names from her distant past, friends I had never met. When I tried to talk to her about the meaning of the day, about our 15 years, her eyes would glaze over. Of course, honey, it's wonderful, she'd say, before immediately changing the subject. Do you think I should have the caterer add a vegan option? Her excitement was for the performance, not the substance. The week before the party, I found her in the garden, staring at the roses. I came up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. Happy anniversary, almost, I whispered. She stiffened for a fraction of a second before relaxing into my embrace. You've given me a beautiful life, Alex, she said, her voice distant. I could feel the but hanging in the air, unspoken. But I didn't press. I was a builder. I believed that if you just ignored the cracks, you could patch them over later. I believed the structure was sound. I clung to that belief like a man clinging to a ledge, refusing to look at the long drop below. I thought one perfect party, one night of celebration, could fix anything. I thought it could remind her of the foundation. I didn't realize she was planning on setting the whole house on fire. The evening of the party was perfect. One of those flawless late summer nights where the air is warm and carries the sweet, heavy scent of cut grass and blooming roses. The string lights I'd hung in the trees cast a golden glow over the garden, illuminating the faces of our 70-odd guests. Laughter and the clinking of wine glasses filled the air. From the deck, where I was manning the grill, I watched Ava move through the crowd. In her silver dress, she was radiant, a shimmering vision of the woman I had loved for nearly 2 decades. For a fleeting moment, I let the warmth of the scene lull me into a false sense of security. This was us. This was real. David, my best friend since high school, came over and handed me a beer. You did good, man, he said, nodding towards the scene. This is the dream, right? It is, I said, and at that moment I almost believed it. After everyone had eaten, I tapped a spoon against my glass to get everyone's attention. The chatter died down. I'm not a man for public speaking, but I felt I had to say something. I cleared my throat, my eyes finding Ava's. Thank you all for coming. I began, my voice a little unsteady. 15 years ago, I married the love of my life. And for 15 years, I've wanted to wake up next to her in the house we made a home. Ava, you are my foundation, my partner, my everything. These have been the best years of my life. To us, it was short, simple, and from the heart. The crowd applauded warmly, and friends patted me on the back. Ava smiled at me, a brilliant, camera-ready smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She floated to the center of the deck, taking the microphone. Leo stood just behind her, a smug, proprietary look on his face, like a stage manager watching his star pupil. Thank you, Alex. That was sweet, she started, her voice smooth and practiced. She turned to the guests. It's so wonderful to see all of you here, celebrating with us. Alex has given me a truly wonderful life. A stable, comfortable life. The way she said stable and comfortable made them sound like diseases. A chill snaked its way up my spine. This wasn't an anniversary toast. It was a eulogy. She paused, taking a deliberate sip of champagne, letting the silence hang. But as some of you know, life is about growth. It's about evolution. And recently, an old and dear friend, Julian, has come back into my life. Her eyes scanned the crowd, deliberately avoiding mine. And his return has made me realize something. It's made me realize that there's a part of myself I shut down a long time ago. A passionate, adventurous part. And I owe it to myself to see if that chapter is truly over. The garden had gone so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. The air crackled with a horrified electric tension. I felt dozens of pairs of eyes on me, but my world had narrowed to the woman in the silver dress, standing 10 feet away, calmly dismantling my life with a microphone. So, she continued, her voice gaining a righteous, almost brave tone, as if she were announcing a charity mission. I've decided I need a break. A sabbatical from our marriage. Just for 3 months. I need to take some time for myself, to explore these feelings with Julian, to rediscover the woman I was. I need this for my own happiness. And I know Alex, being the generous and understanding man he is, will support me in this journey of self-discovery. She finished, raising her glass as if she'd just said the most reasonable thing in the world. No one applauded. The silence was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket of shock and pity. I felt my blood run cold. My hands felt numb. It was the careful, rehearsed cruelty of it that struck me dumb. This wasn't a moment of spontaneous confusion. This was a premeditated execution, carried out in front of everyone I knew. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had humiliated me, turning me into a pathetic footnote in her grand, romantic narrative. I looked past her and saw Leo. He was nodding slightly, a look of triumphant satisfaction on his face. He had helped her craft this. He had enabled this. I didn't scream. I didn't lunge at her. I didn't do anything they might have expected. In that moment of absolute devastation, a strange, chilling clarity descended upon me. I finally saw it all for what it was. The house wasn't a home. It was a stage. Our marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a contract where I provided security in exchange for the illusion of love. And the contract had just been publicly voided. Without a word, I walked to the small table that held our anniversary cake, a beautiful, 3-tiered thing we would now never cut. I pulled my wedding ring off my finger, the simple, solid gold band I hadn't removed in 15 years, and placed it deliberately on the white frosting. Then I turned, walked through the stunned crowd who parted from me like I was a ghost, and went back into the empty house, the sound of the party's deathly silence following me. I locked the door and leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't break down. Not yet. I just stood there in the quiet of the house I had built, and I listened. After a few minutes of what I assumed was panicked whispering, I heard the sound of cars starting, guests making their hasty escapes from the carnage. An hour later, the house was silent again. I was sitting in the dark living room when I heard her key in the lock. She came in, followed by Leo. She didn't turn on the main lights, probably assuming I was upstairs shattered. Through the slightly open door to the den where I was sitting, hidden in shadow, I heard her speak to Leo on the phone. Her voice wasn't sad or remorseful. It was high, thrumming with an exhilarating, nervous energy. "I did it, Leo. I can't believe I actually did it," she whispered excitedly. God, his face, he was so stunned he didn't even fight back. It went perfectly. Now I've got 3 months of freedom, 3 months with Julian. And the best part is, he'll be waiting right here when I'm done. He's predictable. We'll still have the house, the security, everything. It's perfect. That was it. That was the sound of the last support beam in my life cracking in two. It wasn't about her confusion. It wasn't about her needing space. It was a cold, calculated plan to have it all, to use my love and my life as a safety net while she chased a fantasy. The pain inside me, a hot, liquid agony, began to cool and harden into something else. Something solid. Something unyielding. Something like steel. She thought I was predictable. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. The sun rose the next morning, but the world felt different, colored in shades of gray. The festive lights in the garden now looked like cheap, tawdry decorations after a wake. I hadn't slept. I had spent the night sitting in the dark, the echo of Ava's triumphant whisper playing on a loop in my head. He'll be waiting right here when I'm done. That single sentence had burned away all the grief, leaving behind the cold, hard ash of resolve. My first call wasn't to her. It was to David. I just said, "I need you." He was there in 30 minutes, a grim look on his face, a bag with 2 large coffees and a bottle of bourbon in his hand. He'd been at the party. He'd seen it all. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat with me at the kitchen table, amidst the debris of the party, and listened as I recounted the final blow, the overheard phone call. When I finished, he shook his head slowly, his jaw tight with anger on my behalf. "Okay," he said, his voice low and serious. "So this isn't a breakup. This is a demolition. What's the plan?" "I'm not the one who's going to be demolished," I said, and the voice that came out of me sounded like my own, but harder, colder. "I'm calling a lawyer. Today." My second call was to a name I got from a contractor I trusted, a man who had been through a notoriously nasty divorce. He described his lawyer as a shark in a designer suit. Her name was Ms. Davis. Her assistant scheduled me for an emergency consultation that afternoon. I walked into her downtown office feeling like a man walking into a hospital for his own autopsy. The space was minimalist, all glass and steel, with a panoramic view of the city. Ms. Davis was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. I told her about the 15 years, the house, the party, the public humiliation, and most importantly, the overheard conversation with Leo. I laid it all out on the polished surface of her conference table. She listened without interruption, her fingers steepled, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. I felt a surge of anxiety, wondering if I had any ground to stand on. "She has declared war, Alex," Ms. Davis said finally, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. "She did it publicly to disarm you, to shame you into compliance. The belief that you would simply wait for her is the height of narcissistic arrogance. We will not be victims here. We will not be reactive. We will be prepared. We will be strategic." The confidence in her voice was like a steel rod being inserted into my spine. "The house is in both your names," she continued, "but you made the down payment from an inheritance. Can you prove that?" I nodded. "Good. You did the physical work to improve its value. We'll get it appraised and document everything. But the most important thing right now is to protect yourself. She believes you are a predictable asset. We need to change that perception immediately." I left her office with a clear, methodical plan of action. I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The fog of shock was lifting, replaced by the sharp focus of a craftsman with a difficult job to do. On the drive home, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. It was Aunt Carol, Ava's mother's sister. She was in her 60s, a retired librarian, and the only member of Ava's family who had always looked at me with genuine warmth. She, too, had been at the party. "Alex, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "What they did to you was monstrous." I left as soon as she said that. "I had to call you. I have to tell you something you should have known a long time ago." I pulled the truck over to the side of the road. "This isn't the first time, Alex," she said, and I could hear her weeping softly. "She's always been this way, and my sister, her mother, has always enabled it. Before you, there was another man, a good man, an architect. She did the same thing to him, left him for Julian, who then broke her heart, and she came crawling back. Julian is a fantasy to her, a symbol of a life without consequences. But she needs men like you to pay for the fantasy. We all knew. We all knew you used your grandfather's inheritance for the down payment, while she contributed nothing. We knew, and we said nothing, and I will be ashamed of that for the rest of my life." Every word was a confirmation, another layer of deceit peeled back to reveal the rotten core. It was devastating, but it was also profoundly liberating. It wasn't my fault. I hadn't failed. I had been systematically deceived by an entire family of smiling cowards. "Thank you, Carol," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means more than you know. I have old bank statements and letters from that time. Alex," she added, "if they can help you, they're yours." When I got home, I felt like a different man. The knowledge Aunt Carol had given me was the final piece of the puzzle. Fueled by a new, righteous anger, I went to the old file server in my office. I remembered Ava backing up her old laptops years ago. It was a long shot, but I started searching through the archives. It took hours, but then I found it. A folder labeled Personal Coro. Inside was a string of emails between Ava and Leo, dated 6 months before the party. I read them, and my blood turned to ice. Leo, just tell him you need a break. He's so in love with his perfect little life. He'll be shocked, but he'll wait. He's predictable. Ava, I don't know. It feels so cruel. What if he says no? Leo, he won't. He's too scared of losing you. You deserve some fun, Ava. You've earned it. By the time you're done with Julian, you'll come back to your beautiful house and your devoted husband. You get to have your fun, and you keep the security. It's the perfect plan. The perfect plan. I printed every single email. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a conspiracy. This was my smoking gun. I immediately scanned and sent them to Ms. Davis. Her reply was instantaneous. This is our foundation. Now we build. The next 2 days were a blur of meticulous action. David came over, and we worked in silence. We rented a truck. We packed every single thing that belonged to me. My clothes, my books, my records, my tools, the symbols of my trade, and my identity. The portrait of my grandfather that had hung in my office. I was careful not to touch any of her things. I wanted her to return to a museum of her own life, a place filled with her possessions but utterly devoid of mine. We worked until the house felt like a cavernous, soulless echo of what it once was. The final step was the most important. I went to the kitchen island, the centerpiece of so many happy memories that now felt like lies. I placed 2 things on its cold, granite surface. First, a large manila envelope. Inside was a certified letter from the law offices of Ms. Eleanor Davis, formally initiating divorce proceedings on the grounds of emotional cruelty and financial premeditation. Second, laid neatly beside it, was the full, printed-out copy of her email exchange with Leo. I took one last look around the house I had poured my soul into. I felt a pang of loss, not for Ava, but for the dream I had believed in. But it was a clean pain, a surgical pain. It was the pain of amputation, necessary for survival. David put a hand on my shoulder. Ready? I nodded. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I had vanished, but I wasn't running. I was advancing to a new position. The war had just begun. For 2 months, I lived in the quiet anonymity of a small, furnished apartment on the other side of town. The silence, which at first felt deafening, slowly became peaceful. I focused on my work, taking on small, intricate projects that required all my concentration. A hand-carved mantelpiece, a custom-built library. It was a form of meditation, a way of rebuilding myself one precise cut at a time. David was my rock, checking in daily, and Aunt Carol would call once a week, her steady voice a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this. I followed Ms. Davis's instructions to the letter. No contact, no social media, nothing. I was a ghost. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the ghost was found. Ava showed up at my new workshop, a small space I'd rented in an industrial park. She must have hired a private investigator. She looked thinner, her eyes wide and frantic. The confident, radiant woman from the party was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she'd been frayed at the edges. Leo was waiting in a sleek black car, parked across the street, the loyal henchman. "Alex," she cried, her voice theatrical enough for the 2 other carpenters in the shared space to look up. "Oh, thank God I found you. I've been so worried." I felt a surge of adrenaline, but I remembered Ms. Davis's words. She will try to create a public scene. She will use emotion as a weapon. Do not engage. Your silence is your power. I continued, sanding the piece of cherry wood in front of me, not looking up. "Alex, please," she said, stepping closer, tears welling in her eyes. "I made a terrible mistake. Julian, it was nothing. It was a childish fantasy. I was back in a week, Alex. A week, and you were gone. Our house, it was so empty. What you did was so cruel." I kept my movement steady, my breathing even. I could feel the eyes of the other men on us, could feel the weight of her performance. "I know you're angry," she sobbed, reaching out to touch my arm. I flinched back, a small, involuntary movement. "But we can fix this. I love you. I've always loved you. Don't throw away 15 years over one stupid mistake." I finally looked up, my eyes meeting hers. I said nothing. I just held her gaze, my face a blank mask. I let her see that her tears, her performance, had no effect on me. She searched my face for a flicker of the old Alex, the man who would have rushed to comfort her, and found nothing. The well of my sympathy had run dry. Defeated by my silence, her face crumpled. She turned and fled back to Leo's waiting car. The counterattack, however, had just begun. That night, her social media, which had been quiet, lit up. There were no direct accusations, only vague, passive-aggressive posts. A picture of a wilting rose with the caption, "Some hearts are too cold to know how to tend a garden." A quote about forgiveness being a virtue that not all men possess. Then her friends started posting a coordinated campaign of sympathy for the wronged wife. The narrative they spun was insidious. Ava, in a moment of confusion, had asked for space, and her cold, controlling husband had responded by vindicatively destroying their life to punish her. The pressure mounted. Mutual friends called, urging me to be the bigger man. Even my own mother called, confused. "Liam, people are saying you threw her out with nothing. What's going on?" It was exhausting. For a few dark days, I felt myself begin to buckle. I sat with David in my small apartment, the legal bills piling up on the table. "Is this worth it?" I asked him, my voice raw. "Maybe I should just give her the house, give her whatever she wants to make this stop. I'm so tired of fighting." David leaned forward, his eyes burning with an intensity that startled me. "Listen to me," he said. "She didn't just ask for a break. She stood on a stage you built, and she executed you in front of everyone you know. Then she planned to come back and live in your house on your terms. This isn't about a house anymore, Alex. This is about your soul. She's trying to burn you to the ground. You cannot give her more matches. You have to see this through." His words, and a subsequent call from Ms. Davis saying, "Hold the line, Alex. The final meeting is set. It's time to end this," with a steel I needed. I straightened my back and prepared for the final confrontation. The mediation was held in a neutral conference room. It felt like a parody of a family gathering. Ava sat across the table, looking pale and fragile, dressed in a conservative gray dress. Leo was beside her, a protective hand on her shoulder, along with their lawyer. I sat with Ms. Davis, a single, slim folder in front of me. As Ms. Davis had predicted, their lawyer let Ava speak first. She delivered an Oscar-worthy performance, her voice choked with emotion. She spoke of a loving but passionless marriage, of her own deep-seated insecurities, of a momentary lapse in judgment that she regretted more than anything in her life. She painted me as a rigid, unforgiving man who responded to her cry for help with an act of unfathomable cruelty. Leo chimed in, talking about how he'd tried to counsel his sister, how worried he'd been for her mental state. They spun a comprehensive, believable web of lies. Through it all, I remained silent, my hands resting on the table. When they had finished, there was a heavy silence. The mediator looked at me with an expression of gentle pity. Ms. Davis let the silence stretch for a full 10 seconds before she spoke. "Thank you for sharing your perspective," she said, her tone level. "It is a compelling narrative." She then opened the folder in front of her. "Now for the facts." She slid the first document across the table to the mediator. "This is a sworn affidavit from Carol Peterson, Mrs. Collins's aunt, detailing a prior, nearly identical incident with a different partner, confirming a pattern of behavior." Ava's eyes widened. Their lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "These," Ms. Davis continued, sliding over a sheaf of bank statements, "are documents showing the transfer of a significant sum of money from a joint savings account to a private account in Mrs. Collins's name only, 3 days before the anniversary party." Ava went pale. Leo's jaw clenched. And finally, Ms. Davis said, her voice dropping slightly, "We have this." She slid the final stack of papers across the table. It was the printed email exchange between Ava and Leo. She had highlighted key phrases in yellow. "He's predictable. He'll be waiting right here when I'm done. You get to have your fun, and you keep the security. The perfect plan." The mediator read the first page, then the second. His expression shifted from pity to astonishment, then to undisguised contempt. He looked up, first at Ava and Leo, then at me. There was nothing left to say. Their entire narrative had been dismantled by cold, hard proof. Ava stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing silently, no sound coming out. The mask of the victim had been ripped away, revealing the cold-hearted conspirator beneath. I finally spoke, my voice quiet but clear in the silent room. I looked directly at Ava, the woman I had once loved, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty peace. "The truth is the truth, Ava," I said. "You built this." The war was over. The divorce was swift. The evidence was so overwhelming they had no choice but to settle on Ms. Davis's terms. I got my inheritance money back off the top. The remaining assets were divided, and the house was sold. The truth, as it always does, found its way out. The story of the emails and the disastrous mediation spread like wildfire, and the narrative of the wronged wife evaporated overnight. I didn't revel in it. I simply closed that chapter. I never saw Ava or Leo again. I heard through Aunt Carol that they had moved out of state. I didn't care where they went. They were no longer a part of my story. Today, my life is smaller and infinitely more peaceful. I work from my shop, the scent of sawdust, and would varnish my constant companion. I'm building a life on a new foundation, one made of self-respect and hard-won wisdom. I learned that a home isn't just wooden nails, it's truth and trust. And if the foundation is rotten, you have to be willing to tear the whole thing down to save yourself. It's one thing to walk away from fire. It's another to stand your ground when they try to burn you down afterward. In the end, what is the true price of peace?